Hi everybody, it's Laura from Green Tree. Today we are talking about Indian food. Now, let me start by saying I am not from India, and unfortunately I have not been there yet. So what I'm going to give you is going to be kind of a basic overview of this huge type of cuisine that is really found in a large area of the world. It's not really just from India. You'll also find the type of food that we think of as Indian food in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, that whole area of the world, Nepal. It's something that's fairly widespread. Also, curry. That's gonna be where we're gonna start. Okay, so when most of us think of curry, what we think of is curry powder. Something like this that is actually a blend of different types of dry spices. Now, this isn't something that you would typically use if you were actually making Indian food in India. This is sort of a to-go version. Think of it like a taco seasoning. There's an awful lot of ways to make tacos, just like there's an awful lot of ways to make curries. So curry powder is its own thing that's really separate from Indian food. Unless you're saying it more like they would say it in Britain, along the lines of, let's go grab a curry, in which case you would be referring to any one of a number of spiced dishes. Now, spiced doesn't have to mean hot, but a lot of these dishes are also spicy. So curry is really just a blend of spices, and if you were making a curry from scratch, you would probably be making it with all sorts of different things added in at different points in the cooking process. One of the most common things that you're pretty much always going to see in a curry is cumin. Well, an Indian curry. If we're talking like an Asian curry, then it's going to be a little bit different. But so cumin, you'll often see it as whole seeds. A lot of Indian dishes start by toasting seeds in oil, and so you'll be using whole cumin seeds and whole mustard seeds, things like this, and heating them until they start popping. And they get this extra little toasty flavor that you don't get from a curry powder. Now, there's nothing wrong with curry powder. It's just not the whole of Indian food. Another common spice that you'll see in Indian food is cardamom pods. We often think of these as being something that would be in a dessert, but they're an important seasoning in chai, like chai tea. But you'll also find them in things like curry powder, savory dishes. And if you've never had lassi, that's an interesting Indian beverage. It's a yogurt drink, and one of the more traditional flavors involves cardamom and rose water, which is actually really good. Hello, I got a little hello on here. So basically we're saying curry is a large category of any type of spiced dish. You can have wet curries, that's what we're often thinking of, and that's what I'm going to be sampling for anybody who comes down to the store. We've got a couple different kinds today. This is a pindi chana, so this is a spicy one that's going to have chickpeas. I'll tell you a little more about these later. There's also dry curries, which is where you're taking something that is going to be more along the lines of a curry powder and tossing your ingredients. Typically those will be meat dishes in the powder, and you're going to have a much drier finished dish. It's not super common to see pork or beef in Indian food. Beef more often than pork. But you will see a lot of chicken, a lot of goat, which is often substituted with lamb in Europe and the US, and a lot of vegetable dishes. So I'm just going to give you a couple other basic terms. Another thing that you will frequently see in Indian cooking is ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. This is a really common fat in Indian food. Ghee is essentially butter that has been taken and cooked until a certain type of solids is separated out as this sort of like white foam on the top, and you take that away and you get this very smooth, you can kind of see it's almost slightly translucent compared to regular butter, and this is an excellent fat, and it can handle a bit higher of a heat than regular butter can, and this is often a starting place for Indian dishes. If you're deciding to make Indian food at home and you don't want to use a dairy product like ghee, you're probably better off using something like sunflower oil or even coconut oil rather than olive, because olive oil is just not really found in Indian food, and the flavor won't quite mesh the same way that a less flavored oil like sunflower or safflower would work. And then Coconut is okay because a lot of Indian dishes already have coconut, so it'll blend in. Speaking of coconut, something that you'll see a lot, so they call this mixed vegetable curry with cottage cheese. Really, it's a korma with paneer. Korma is a type of creamy curry. Usually it's made creamy with either dairy milk or coconut milk. And when I say coconut milk, I'm talking about the thick kind that comes in a can, not the kind that you would pour over your cereal that's thinner. So it's actually really something almost like a stroganoff type of texture to a korma, where it's thickened with that creamy liquid. This particular one is actually a dairy korma. This is one of the less spicy Indian dishes typically because the dairy or the coconut takes down that chili spice a bit. This one, it has a lot of vegetables in it, it has cashews, and as I said, it has paneer, which is a type of soft white cheese that's usually cut into little cubes. That's what they're actually talking about when the package says cottage cheese. It's not like the cottage cheese we think of in tubs. It almost looks like little chunks of tofu, but it's actually cheese. Then we're also going to be trying this one, this Spinach Dal. This often will also, this type of green dish, so let me show it a little closer. This is made by cooking down spinach until it's really soft and becomes almost like almost the consistency of if you made a spinach smoothie. But saag is the term you would typically use to refer to any kind of dish with these greens in it. So saag can be made with spinach, or you would see it with mustard greens. You could do it with kale if you wanted to. And then dal, which they have in the name of this one, is any dish made with like split lentils or peas or beans. So once they're split in half, they're referred to as dal. Depending on the type, they'll cook down so they form a smooth paste, or they'll hold together like the ones in this dish here. This spinach dal is the mildest thing that I'm going to be doing today. It's got a tiny bit of spice to it, but it's really pretty mild. And often you can see this would be served over rice. That's pretty common with Indian food, or with bread. You would most often see naan, which is slightly thicker, kind of like this. And it's actually raised with yeast. It reminds me most of something like fry bread if you've ever had it. It's soft and chewy and a little bit thick. Or something called roti or chapati, which is a round flatbread. Looks a little bit like a cross between a pita and a tortilla. And those would be common ways of serving this. And then the spiciest one we're going to be having today, oh thank you, I got a compliment in the comments. The spiciest one we're going to be doing today is this pindi chana. This is not a type of dal because the chickpeas are whole. This is the spiciest dish that we're going to do. This is actually a pretty common thing to see, this type of spiced chickpea mixture. You'll see a lot of these sauces that have this red color. It's not typically from tomatoes, it's from the spices, but this one does actually have some tomatoes in it, which gives it, I would describe it as being almost aggressively savory, but in a good way. This one has the strongest cumin flavor, which if you haven't eaten a lot of Indian food, might remind you a bit of tacos, because cumin is something that's very common to both Mexican and Indian foods. So there you go. I know this is the briefest of overviews. India is a huge country, and the Indian subcontinent where you'll find these types of food is even bigger. Depending on where you are in India or within that area of the world, you're going to find curries made with all sorts of different dishes. They can be creamy, they can be dry, they can have dairy or not, they can have meat or not. But if you want to get just a little bit of a taste of what some of these dishes are like, I will be sampling out 3 of these until 5 o'clock today. And if you have questions, put them in the comments. I'll do my best to either answer them or find somebody who can. So there you go. There's your little beginning introduction to Indian food. Happy Tuesday!